I noticed that the main blocker of adopting this, it's not math, not tools, not any other rational reasons, more like a perception, beliefs, and philosophical reasons. So decision makers, most of them don't understand how all this works. So that's will be my primary goal in my new venture, Incrementality Insider, where I'll help decision makers to make sense of it, simplify, and eventually when they tackle this, they will win in business because there's so much money being wasted.
Talgat, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I'm excited to chat all things incrementality, measurement, and budget optimization with you today. You're a leading expert in the space. To kick things off, I wanted to contextualize your experience for folks. Could you just give a quick introduction into who you are and what your career journey has looked like from a incrementality and budget optimization perspective?
Sure. I think my background is, I would say, unconventional in terms of I didn't have a prior knowledge and expertise and sort of like build up I need to deal with. So I immigrated to the US back in 2015, and by random chance of luck landed at Google as a contractor in 2017, and straight in the heart of the area of experimentation, incrementality, causal measurement. I started in a GTM role, but slowly start actually uncover the passion to it and how fascinating this topic and how important it is in decision making, not only related to marketing budgets overall. I think essence of any effective decision making comes back to causality, like cause and effect. That's what we actually trying to solve, right? Like with different means, different words, but essentially you need to find out what works for your objectives, and this is actually can be solved with the causal measurement approach. So it was first introduction by Google of geo-experimentation as a framework, the new approach to measurement. First paper came out, not first, but influential one, widely adopted, called GBR, geo-based regression. Very, I would say, complicated for the day-to-day marketeer. Like it's a multi-linear regression, and it's very complex to implement. It also has its own drawbacks. I'm not going to go in the details of it, but the next paper came out, time-based regression, which is much simpler, using the Bayesian framework. And what helped me that within the Google, I was on a part of as a measurement lead, marketing science, helping advertisers to measure effectively and scientifically their investment in Google media channels. And with several years, I spent only on that, and that's how it's become my thing. So, and just summarizing the experience that I ran, probably more than like hundreds of studies, different shape and forms, educated teams, and I was in charge for the Project Lift. It's a cross-function initiative across internal Google teams, helping analytical leads to learn and help advertisers to properly measure incrementality. And just skipping a few steps, after Google, I moved to Amazon DSP as a research scientist, even though I don't have any background. I don't even have a US education. It's just, again, series of luck, connection, and actually being passionate about it helped me to get there. So worked there. It was also an interesting experience, exposed to programmatic world, very confusing, very, I would say, blotted, and very, very complex world of open internet on programmatic. And after that, moved to TikTok, where I was more on the PMM side and helping the internally coordinate work between measurement teams and product teams. And all in all, came to the point last year where actually I felt that I know enough to do on my own. I don't need any corporate structures for it. And also, this is my thing all the way. I did it for the 9 years, and I'm planning to do it for the rest of my life, because it's so much can be done, and there's so many gaps and so many areas which not being properly explained, understood through different reasons. So, and I noticed that the main blocker of adapting this. It's not math, not tools, not any other rational reasons. It's more like a perception, beliefs, and philosophical reasons. So decision makers, most of them don't understand how all this works. So that's will be my primary goal in my new venture, Incrementality Insider, where I'll help decision makers to make sense of it, simplify, and eventually, when they tackle this, they will win in business because there's so much money being wasted nowadays. So this is my intro.
That's awesome. And I think I share a similar obsession with you behind understanding what's driving results, what's driving performance, because when you run a multi-channel media mix at scale, you know that there is spend getting wasted basically at all times, and identifying it and finding the areas to scale, finding the efficient spend is super rewarding and gratifying. Why do you think that so many advertisers and marketing leaders still struggle with this even today?
I think there is one phenomenon, like a problem, industry-wide problem. I trying to internalize and synthesize and put the structure and zoom out and come up with some frameworks, because what's happening nowadays, there's a different platforms, the mini universe. They have their own incentive and agenda, and the whole area of advertisers, they are confused because there's so many misleading narratives. And what happened that back in the days when the first introduction of the personal computer and then smartphone, it was a relatively simple world where attribution was solved. Attribution being used as the representation of the truth. So most of attribution dashboard perceived as a performance. And then over time, things got really complex. There are so many devices, so many universes of the walled garden, and as a user, where you come in and out, and nobody, absolutely nobody, even Google, have a full visibility of the users across whole internet. And it creates this huge siloed world of the mini universes, like universe of universes, and then you come in and out. And back in the day when everything was simple, the promise of the one user, one device, identification, etc., was easy. And then the drastically increase the cost of the measurement, because measurement is expensive. But since there's a rise of performance marketing, which kind of pushed back the brand marketing, that's a different story. And there's so many problems. But long story short, experts, marketers in the field, over the years working on this, they didn't adapt it to the new world at scale. There is some, of course, adapting, but the majority is still thinking the attribution, it is a representation of the reality. But what ends up happening, there's so many mini universes, so many a book of records, databases, and the problem came out that the reconciliation, they're trying to get a sense of it. And then that's why with iOS release of the privacy and overall trend of the privacy of the users across the board led to the situation that, okay, this is not reliable, this is not working, but not all the company moved away from that conceptual understanding that this is not a representation of the reality. So that's why the holistic approaches as MMM and geo-experimentation, which also have more holistic approach, which was you using as a KPI top line, not attributed through the filter of someone's logic of attribution. That's why there is a huge misconception, misunderstanding. And the main problem, there's no investment behind it to address this issue at scale. There is a rise of the measurement SaaS, and I see that renaissance of MMM, faster, cheaper, but that's kind of tooling side. That's great. But without addressing the overall conceptual understanding, I see I know a lot of companies, and I have friends and colleagues, huge network in the area. They have a hard time to adapt it because fundamentally it needs to be a new a doctrine, new thinking should came in, and it should come and then explain it. Look, this is this is a different world, and whatever you did for the last decade, you have some built up knowledge and filter, it's not relevant anymore. And it's really hard for people in Eastern to admit, because that's become part of their belief and part of the identity. And they cannot move away easily from that, saying like, oh, like all those years I was doing it wrong. So that's the biggest problem. And for decision makers, which will be my primary focus, they confuse even further, like even more, because there's so many conflicting truths. There's so many like sources of truths, and they can so confused. They have a different day-to-day like a objective for the brain space, like, or they dealing with the funding, the burn rate, hiring, and then this coming this like they don't have a brain capacity to like properly understand, and they make a big mistake. They outsource the judgment. I like to give this example, like all this high stakes conversations happening, either measurement vendor or like test results, and my man comes into the table and they say, okay, what's going on? There's some presenting. And another problem that our colleagues from the field, they overcomplicate it most of like too much, like they come into the state decision making and it starts saying like a confidence intervals, p-values, this and that. There's so many unnecessary complexity of the wording, and decision makers, they don't get it, and they try to outsource the judgment. They call in the like a generalist data scientist. Can you explain this to me? Like, what's going on? Can you, is it like, I trust you in our team. Can you tell me yes or no, good or bad, like how bad it is? And those folks usually they focused on the different things, and then just thrown at them, and they're like, oh, like it's a second priority, and they don't have expertise, and they do something quick to appease the stakeholders, and what quality is not there. So like, long story short, lots of problems, huge vacuum of the expertise, and big misunderstanding that world's changed so much. Attribution is not equal to true performance.
Right. And of course, as a founder or CEO, you are solving multiple problems. This might be on the lower end of your list. And so the approach, of course, is to outsource it in a lot of ways. Similarly, with AI, a lot of CEOs have extreme FOMO. And so they say, I want to make sure I'm doing everything right. I don't want to be missing out on this big trend. I want to get into your approach into measurement and incrementality testing, but I believe that there's still a delta between measuring media effectiveness and bidding and optimizing media, because if there was no concept of bidding and optimizing towards a specific event, it would be a lot easier for us to just say, let's have a media mix model, let's do incrementality testing. That's going to be our approach for optimizing our mix. The reason why we still have last click attribution and we still have, deterministic and probabilistic attribution is because we need an event to send to the ad platforms to optimize towards. And so you have all of these different forms of marketing measurement. At a high level, incrementality are kind of a way to experiment, but you still need data to flow into the ad networks for their platforms to know what to go after. So how do you make sense, or how do you think about that kind of dichotomy?
Really good question. And I think, but it implies that platforms, when you share the conversion signal, optimizing for incremental users, which is not always the truth, because my understanding on high level, so each platform either over attributing or under attributing, and depending on the scale is different, and ultimate goal should be when you combine all those claimed reporting of attribution, it should match to your actual sales, or your CRM or actual cash flow. so but it's not, that for sure that it's not happening. There is a lot of double counting, inflated metrics, etc. So some platforms you cannot treat equally in terms of the attribution most of attribution aggressiveness of the getting claiming the credit. So some of them, you feed them more data, they conveniently allocate it close to the final decision of the checkout, and objective is not change the behavior of the user, but just conveniently piggyback when the user already heading to convert. So that's a problem of the causality, because again, there's deviation, big deviation happened. Running the media to change the user behavior to cause the desired action, or solving for attribution, because attribution, it's a different concept. It's like the purpose of attribution and the where they overlap back in the, let's say, 90s, beginning 2000, where attribution was solving the causality and they're displacing it, and it was like reliable enough, but it's not the case anymore. So, and I'm not sure if all the platforms perform better if you upload your conversion data. Like this should be, I think, carefully evaluated case by case, because in some cases it hurts your business. Like again, this is a very complicated topic, and I cannot say a universal answer. But I've seen cases where business decided not to share any conversion data at all. They just optimize for reach and frequency, and just solving for reach. And then they see through incrementality studies that just doing the like a broader reach, giving them more incremental users. And yeah, like again, case by case.
Of course. Yeah, it's something that I think about and play around with a lot, because when you are bidding towards a specific conversion event, the ad platform will show impressions to those that are converting. But if you have a strong natural conversion behavior, those ads are being served to people that would convert anyway. And if you optimize away from, I need to get as many purchases as possible, to something else, that's kind of a proxy for showing impressions to people that might not be in your I'm about to convert pool, that is actually an incremental conversion. And I'm exploring this all the time.
I can share quickly, just to close this loop. I can share a really interesting case where I uncovered interesting phenomena. So I think what happened in Meta in February, the huge algorithm change, I dig deeper for that into this case, and I found the two concept, which is actually it's hurting some advertisers. Lots of advertisers getting hurt by this new update, and I think Meta, like any decision maker who looking for the agency, they need to clearly divide the expertise and cases, and then develop the insights before and after 2025 February. This new update changed the game completely. And what's happened, that maybe you notice as a user yourself, that when you as a user see the ad on Instagram, and then you engage or watch or even click, and it triggers the whole chain of event of, like, it's called ads clustering. So now you see a lot of ads in the same category, like a lot of them. Like before, you didn't show the interest intent signal. Now you're getting bombarded with it. Like any type of product and service, you just show little interest. That's it. Like you being bombarded, and you get exposed to a lot of their competitors with the same category, which you didn't exist before, or you didn't know existed. And the way how it's feeding the really advanced algorithm, which is, the social game changed completely. It was social graph, that was a knowledge graph, interest graph. So you, in organic content, when you engage in certain topics, then really like very fancy machine learning AI algorithm start to match like this behavior to certain advertiser, and then like it's all feeding this loop. And what happened eventually, there is concept called scouting, and then piggybacking. So the advertisers in category who spend the most, it end up educating the whole like user base, and then others who piggybacking on them, they get a free ride and exposure. So what's happening? I saw the huge case that advertisers spend most educating the whole category about the whole category of the whole huge pool of users, because algorithm finding very aggressively the users who are interested in this topic. And when your ads are very generic and uncovering the whole category, like you don't, as a user, you don't know this existed, this offering is existed, product or services. Now you show the interest, the scout, those who found you paid the most, but the whole category like a riding behind of it. And what's end up happening, the top spender wastes most of the money, but the whole category of smaller guys is rising, and their awareness rising, and their sales rising, because the one guy being the fool of overspending. So that's a different topic, but yeah, I'll share more in my resource.
Talgat, what is your framework or philosophy for uncovering and improving wasted and inefficient ad spend?
I developed several like my own frameworks, and I was really busy all these years implementing, but now I have a time to put it in the like a concept and structure and playbooks, which will be in my resource. And by the way, I decided not to do the newsletter. There's so many newsletters, and world doesn't need another newsletter. So I going to I myself like I signed up for so many of them, and I'm not even offering some of them. Even world is very noisy. There's so much to like FOMO to read, but I decided to make a resource which is not a newsletter. It will be, I call it Incrementality Intelligent Desk. So it will be the resource for decision makers, marketeers to come in, and there will be clear, simple playbooks and guides to implement and follow step by step. So pure action, no water, because I understand that when you, as a solopreneur, for example, you're trying to figure out what you value, like, of course, like newsletter is a good start, but for me, it's all clear. I don't need to figure out my value. I know what I'm good at, and I need to just focus on the pure delivery. And then the most important part that is to change the mindset. That's why I'm addressing this and putting lots of effort to educate decision makers that it starts from the beliefs and it starts with the culture. Because no matter what you do with the tools, if incentives not there, like you probably are aware that the different stakeholders may have different true intentions and true objective. They don't share it publicly, but internally, like it comes to politics, it comes to agency who get a cut from the media budgets they in charge of, and they're not interested for the efficiency. They're interested for continue increasing the budget because they get a cut. So that's like misalignment of incentives. That's the key. And I think the decision makers, they're not aware how much money being wasted and how it can be prevented. And there's ways to do it. Like I'm going to share the 7-day sprint, like how to do certain steps to stop the waste. Like go in the platform, turn off this stupid things which not supposed to be there. There is so many buttons and knobs, and every platform is so confusing. And then beliefs, perception, and this is where I'm introducing which I was able to put in the thoughts, like what's the path of the getting better at measurement. It's not like everybody says we need to get better at measurement. What does it mean? And I see from my experience from both sides, there is a path and there is a levels to it. So I call it measurement elevation atlas. And the level 1 is I call them sleepwalkers. It's not their fault for the reason I described that before, because of build up and misconception and all this huge gap in the expertise. I see that 70-80% of the advertisers, they're in that stage of sleepwalking. They're not aware they're wasting money because they accepting the different truths of the dashboards. The next level, level 2, it's awakening. They start questioning, like, okay, how do we know is it true? Like, we need to test this. We need to get to the actual hard evidence, and we need to make have the courage to admit what we don't understand and what we understand what works. And there is but it's a biggest struggle, but in the same time, biggest efficiency gains happening there. The next level, it's enlightenment. This already kind of figured this out. Now they addressing the waste. And after, when you clean up your system is most likely bloated between 30 to 40% of your budget wasted. And once you clean up the system, then you have a better, like a signals, you reduce the noise and you have a better sensitivity for signal. And then you will find the non-linear growth opportunity on channels. And as you know, the growth is combination of factors. Different proportion of spend of different channels can give you the best ROI possible. But when you have a lot of bloat in it, it's hard to detect. Even as a MMM practitioner, they know that all those evaluation measure of MMM will be much, much better when you clean up your system of the non-incremental spec, like MAPE and then R squared and all this. Like it will show, okay, now you have a better prediction, higher accuracy, and this is for enlightened. Then I see that good trends. Companies, there is an organizational level, there is a personal level. They're moving from the stages. And next one I call it omniscient. This is like guys like A players, killers. They like figure this out. You cannot bullshit them with some narrative propaganda of the other initiatives from other stakeholders or other parties. So they know what works. They test it. They aggressively testing always. They test everything, and they see the test and learn. It's become their like a default setting. And on an organizational level, on the personal level, those experts exist. I see them. It's growing, the population of them who they come into the company. Whatever they touch, they like super efficient. They cut the waste fast, and then they help company to grow. Actually, this is one of the most, let's say, growth unlocker as a competitive edge nowadays. Having someone like this in your site, like figuring this out and internally also educating and change the culture. But closing my monologue on the organizational side, company who figure this out, and you probably are aware that there's most players, they figure out to the point where this is such a lucrative business, advertising. This works so well. Why don't we do it ourselves? And they become advertising platforms themselves. And you see the rise of retail media network and those Ubers, Netflix, bookings, like Expedia, like so many of them now doing their own ad network because it's such a lucrative business. Because the value creation is that so many, the whole like a business community confused how to measure that's why the value is there. So I'll share more in my resource, but this is how I see. And the frameworks, depending on the case, closing on the frameworks, I'll say typical answer, it depends. If as a practitioner, I try to do less of it, but sometimes I will do as a premium offering. Depending on the appetite, how fast you want to move on the how aggressive you want to be, because it requires courage. It requires moving fast and stopping everything what you do and addressing this issue. And not, I noticed already that not all the organization are ready for it. It's too fast, too aggressive to update the beliefs. And that's why like you need to start maybe slower, like depending on appetite, you can start, okay, let's do MMM. Okay, we see here and there MMM have a lot of multi-collinearity and other issue. Let's do calibration with experiments. So I would say that most popular approach nowadays, start with MMM, calibrated incrementality, and get better at it. But there is a shortcut, fastest way when you can just do this multi-cell experiment aggressively, and within a short period of time, you tackle this really fast within like, 2 months. But you can, but not all the companies are ready for it. That's why you're gonna stretch for the like 2 years. So it depends.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about organizational culture change, you're talking about behavioral change, and that takes time. And based on the level of the organization, size of the organization, the stage, it can take a very long time. We have about 5 minutes left. I want to move to rapid fire round, a couple of kind of quick questions with what your hot takes are. I'd love to hear about it. My first question, everyone's talking about AI right now, and we'll continue to talk about AI. Where does AI and incrementality collide? And how should we be thinking about the relationship between those two things?
Very interesting, complex question, because in my personal opinion, before tackling AI, this should come first, like understand efficiency and where you're actually wasting money before jumping in the form of AI. What AI practically can help is the educating and then automating and like streamlining this manual tasks related to testing and incrementality. There is a lot of operational efficiency can be accelerated with AI. But the critical part, never ever in marketing outsource judgment to the AI. It should be like, because AI is trained on the past knowledge, and past knowledge, as we all know, like regarding the measurement, it's not relevant anymore. So the training set feed with the incorrect, non-relevant information. If you want to apply to the business, AI cannot gonna solve this. And there are so many issues where like causality, incrementality not properly addressed in any AI. And I personally tested all those LLMs like with the hard question. They come up with something like which of course it was relevant like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, but not now. So long story short, when they collide, operational efficiency, education, like building some training programs for the team, changing the culture, and like some interactive models testing. I myself playing around for this with the educational part, but never ever, I'll never recommend to trust in AI for the high stake decision making and the measurement, because it's completely wrong regarding this.
What's common experiment design mistake that you see even advanced teams making?
Doing something for the sake of doing without proper hypothesis. Like everything should start with a simple hypothesis of the business objective. And the biggest unlock when I was doing the workshop, by the way, I'm also be offering those, before tooling, before all this design, first you need to get clear on the business objective and then how it translates in the measurable hypothesis. This is the biggest step of the like moment, like, okay, then is it measurable? Is it testable? Is it feasibility is there? Before jumping right away to testing, you need to build this connection. And actually those professionals like Omniside or Enlightened, they develop this intuition of the feasibility even before testing. Even before test, they can play around with observational data and see like, is it possible to test or not? Like playing around with this noise and signals ratio. So that's like a sort of like a approach from Art of War, Sun Tzu. I don't know if you heard about this, like winning the war before winning the battle before the battle. You need to be more certain than running blind and doing something. So like the key is, the biggest mistake I see, how to translate business objectives to the testable, measurable hypothesis, which you have a data supporting that is measurable. So because I see some really stupid mistakes when they jump inside of the testing without this feeling, and then they try to boil the ocean. Like the small sample size, they try to measure some different hypothesis, which is not even possible to do. But yeah, there's so many of them, but this is the key one.
Amazing. Last question. What's one mental model or book that has shaped how you make decisions?
I really love work of the Dr. Benjamin Hardy, the series of books 10x easier than 2x, and the most recent one like impacted me so much. I'm going to implement in my business and life. It's called Science of Scaling, and the key concept is that treating the time as a tool, and you can change all your decision making today if you filter out to the future you desire, like for desired future. And then everything becomes so clear that you don't need to do 90% of stuff you're doing if you filter it right with your big goal you have. So that's why when I intuitively already kind of knew this, when I left the big tech, I put this very delusional goal. Like people told me it's delusional, but I know it's possible. The bloat and waste is so big. I want to help businesses to optimize $1 billion. And it's possible. I know it's possible. And that's creating the value that kind of will be byproduct. Like, of course, like I'll get some small cut out of it when I make it happen. But putting in the value first, helping drive those results. Now I filter all my decisions through that one simple goal where I will optimize $1 billion. And I already made some progress, like 20 million. But I need to change direction because it's too slow. Now that's why I'm addressing this and finding the core issue of the decision maker perception and the beliefs. this is where I believe I'm going to change the slope of this traction and hockey stick, like move it faster. So scaling.com, definitely recommend to anyone because it may change your life like in a way you cannot imagine.
Love it. Talgat, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.